Have you ever witnessed a child seeing fireworks for the first time? I mean, I saw my 2-year-old experience it, and the view is spectacle. I mean, the bright colors, the roaring sounds, it's spectacular. It's overwhelming, for sure, but also awe-inspiring. And that's precisely how I felt when I walked out of ASML Experience Center almost 2 years back. In fact, first time I saw a ASML machine was in the reception in the headquarters, building number 7. In the reception, you see this machine, which was designed almost like 3 decades ago. But to me, it looked like something that has come just out of future. In ASML, there is something called an experience center. So for visitors and for curious new employees, they give you a tour to explain how the complex yet beautiful engineering work behind that goes into these ASML machines. Almost 2 years back when I started, so I had an opportunity to go there. And what you see there is like really questions the innovation, the human innovation, and it leaves you with an awe-inspiring thing. What you see here is called a EUV machine. EUV stands for extreme ultraviolet lithography machines. And for people who are not familiar with these machines, basically you can consider them as printers. But instead of printing papers, they basically print the circuits which you use in your day-to-day laptops, mobile phones, and things like that. And the interesting thing is they print those circuits up to 15 nanometers. So just for reference, a human hair is approximately 50,000 to 80,000 nanometers. And these machines make circuits of less than 15 nanometers. Without going into too much technical details, because this is also relevant for the rest of my story, a EUV machine basically creates or prints those circuits by using low wavelength, extreme low wavelength ultraviolet rays, which is sort of then used to make those circuits on the silicon wafers. And the way they generate this ultraviolet rays is also extremely incredible. I mean, they shoot the tin droplets, and they shoot with those tin droplets twice in a really quick succession, which generates the extreme ultraviolet rays, which they capture to create those circuit boards. So this is what you also see in an experience center. If you get an opportunity to be a visitor to see in an experience center, so they explain much better than, or much more in detail than what I'm telling you. But what it left me when I walked out is I already sort of knew for a machine of this complex nature, there must be like a very intricate dance of software, systems, processes, data. Like Mark Anderson said, software is eating the world, and that is true in this case too. So I already knew that within ASML, the IT landscape is not going to be just vast, but it's going to be huge and complex. And when I started taking a deep dive into my role, large and complex turned out to be like understatements. But what they say, with great complexity comes great opportunities. And during the course of last 2 years in our DevOps journey, we have encountered a lot of challenges, of course, but also learned a lot of lessons. And that's what we intend to share with you for next 20 minutes or so. And whenever I say we are ASML, I'm referring to ASML IT. And for this talk, for sake of simplicity, ASML is a large organization. So to keep things simple, ASML as you could consider into 3 broad buckets or 3 pillars. Something factory, which manufactures those machines, D&E, design and engineering, and our story and our experiences come from the IT side of ASML. My name is Phani Bhushan. Floor already mentioned, I work as a principal consultant at Devon, together with my colleague Tom.
I'm Tom Slenders, and I work actually at ASML as a DevOps specialist, trying to help team adopt several DevOps practices, basically where they are valuable for them. And so, Pani already talked a little bit about the journey that we embarked on roughly about 2 years ago. But I actually want to go a little bit further back, because Agile was already there for a little bit longer. And about 4 years ago, ASML embarked on a bigger Agile transformation. So there was a bigger thing happening really within the company. And it's important to know what was happening there, basically, because we were talking about a couple of thousand people that eventually changed into about 50 or so Agile release trains. So that's a lot of people going to work in a different way. And we already see some of the benefits from that. They're working more closely to the business. They actually start to understand better what is happening there. So that's really some nice results already. And there's many things still going on in this journey. So we're now currently looking at how are all these people working together, that network, how are they working, and can we actually improve that? Because we sometimes see that things are getting stuck. But about 2 years ago, we really started to focus on DevOps specifically. What can we use from that? What is valuable for the rest of the company? And so what we thought is, let's leverage what is already there. There's already many people helping with adopting Agile practices, and we can use those people that are already in the company to help them adopt DevOps where it's relevant. So we're thinking of really a pull approach, get us in when there's relevant expertise that is necessary. Because that way we can really build on the momentum. There's people are already changing, they're already doing cool new things, so can we leverage that? Because DevOps can really bring that further along. And so we really tried that pull approach initially, because initially was a push approach from the whole organization. Can we try a pull, really people draw in where it's really necessary?
And like, so as Tom mentioned, so the Agile was more of a top-down, you have to change it, and hence that resulted in almost the whole IT organization converted into 15 Agile release trains with different teams. What we also realized is, so since that momentum already exists now, why not we capture that and really use that momentum to introduce DevOps principles and practices to these arts. So what we did, obviously, one thing that we noticed is everyone in the organization had a different opinion of what DevOps is. So probably some of you might recognize this, like 6 blind people and an elephant. So you ask 10 people and you get 15 different opinions of what DevOps was, and we wanted to sort of start from there. So if you ask, okay, what is DevOps? Yeah, it could be platform tools or CI/CD pipelines, et cetera, et cetera. So we wanted to define our elephant for ASML. And what we said is, okay, so for us within ASML, what DevOps means to us is this. So we, of course, I'm not going to go in detail, but we created a lot of knowledge base, and each of this is like a clickable tile. People can go inside it, they can understand what it is, why is it, and some practices, tools that they can use around it, so on and so forth. And in our wishful thinking, we thought, okay, so perfect, we have all these things in place, already arts are in place, people are now already working in Agile way of working, so they would be excited, they will just grab onto it and fetch some Agile coaches or DevOps coaches to help them to gain more maturity. And then we thought, okay, so we, as Tom mentioned, we sort of looked at a pull-based pattern. In a nutshell, it's all about if a art leadership, Agile Release Train leadership, we call them LC, Leading Coalition within ASML. So when they get excited, hey, so this, we want to gain benefit from these DevOps principles and practices, they would basically approach a DevOps coach, and together with the coach, we help them understand, okay, so what exactly is a DevOps and why do we need it, and most importantly, try to align their business objectives with kind of competencies or practices that could start focusing first. And then we do a little bit of education, like all Scrum Masters and product owners within the art, and then do a value stream mapping so that we identify, okay, what are the right areas that we can start focusing on, map them with some, hook up them with some competencies so that there is shared learning, so on and so forth. So we thought, hey, this is going to work seamlessly, but oh boy, we couldn't be wrong anymore. We expected that people are going to pull because now they have knowledge and people to help, but we quickly realized change is quite hard. And by the way, when I showed this picture to some of my colleagues, they really couldn't connect it. So this is from like a robot store, which is meant for cleaning floors, but people are still doing the thing what they were doing earlier, which is a little bit irony. And that's exactly what we also noticed in ASML, that we said, people, there was like, we realized, why are not people jumping and with excitement? Then, well, a lot of reasons. One of them is change fatigue. These people went through like a really large change for the last 4 years, which was like pushed to them. So now they were like, okay, you know what? Maybe that's a bit too much for now to, again, look into something new. And also, what we realized is people always sort of choose easy path. If someone else is doing my releases, why should I look into it? If someone is doing testing, if someone is doing monitoring, let me do what I'm already doing it. So, and that's what triggered us to sort of pivot our approach, and we actually pivoted to sort of a push-pull approach.
So one of the things we then realized really is that if you go full pull, people can really just pull in when you're necessary, you'll never be necessary really. People don't know at least that you're really necessary. But going for a push approach, really forcing it top down again, was also not really an option. So we had to balance the two. And that was really where we were trying to figure out what works for our context. And this will be different for everyone, but I want to quickly share at least what we are now doing, basically. So we ended up with some kind of a combined approach. First things that we're doing is really having an awareness training. People don't know what they're missing in a lot of cases, so you need to first make sure that they understand what they're missing. And we're targeting middle management basically with these kind of things, because that most of the people on the floor, they actually know about this already. But if middle management doesn't really can connect it, what are my business benefits really? What does it bring me? It's not relevant for them. So we use a push approach for that. And one of the things we really try to do is make them understand what the value is for them and really create hooks to pull in relevant expertise. So, for example, one thing we typically do is really say, hey, what kind of problems do you have? Do you want to have a coffee? And everybody really likes coffee, so that works quite well. And another thing that we do, at the end of this training, we give everyone a book, The Phoenix Project. So it's a pretty well-known book. Many people probably know about it. It's a lovely book, but a lot of people actually didn't read it. And so there was this one person, after the training, 2 weeks later, he came back to me and he said, Tom, I just went on holiday and I read the book. This was the best book I've ever read. This is exactly the problems we're having. How can we start solving this? How can we start adopting these things? And it worked brilliantly. And so now, then you have that conversation and we can really start working on these problems. But we had to push it a little bit first. And so then what we basically do is similar to what we did before. So we try to set some goals and really try to connect this to the business, because if you want to do bigger changes, bigger things, they need to understand what it eventually brings them. But you do need to collaborate with the teams as well, because they eventually need to do these things. So you do need to work with them as well. So how do these bigger goals connect to the things on the work floor? But then also create that first success and celebrate it with each other. You will get some nice results, and then if you celebrate them, you prove to the rest of the company that it's valuable. And so what we do is basically we have a pull approach for this step for the early adopters. That guy that we gave the Phoenix project and was super happy about it, he's willing to do this. But some people are a little bit more hesitant. So we first prove it with that first person, and then we move on to the others. And eventually what is important though is to really embed this in their way of working, because DevOps is just one of the many things you can improve upon. So they need to know how to improve further, but they already have their improvement cycles in place, so can we really embed that in there so they think about it when it's relevant?
And what we also focused is how do we nurture the continuous improvements. As we mentioned, we already went through an agile transformation. There are a lot of events that were already in place. However, in order to continuously nurture improvements also to on DevOps principles and the mindset, what we also did was to actually empower existing roles. When I mean existing roles, it could be like system architects, it could be agile coaches, it could be scrum masters, it could be product owners. So we also sort of designed specific targeted materials. For example, for agile coaches who are already attached to each release train, we actually empowered them with making them understand what is it, why is it, how about it, and also equipped with some tools where some workshops or some games that they can facilitate, they can create that curiosity in their arts and their departments. And that worked out quite well. And another thing that really worked for us is actually showcasing success stories. So we have something called a super demo. That's an event where all the teams within IT, they come together and they share their successes, and we actively sort of tickle or nudge or push whatever the teams to actually share their success stories. And one of the things that recently that I remember is a team shared their story about DevOps addiction, how they made a lot of things possible, and that already created a lot of curiosity and, oh, wait a minute, okay, if you guys are doing it, let's also think about it. So that sort of created that ripple effect that we were hoping. And so success stories, empowering teams, and also actively sharing those, the knowledge bases that we created. And we also did a couple more things.
And so the last thing that we want to highlight, at least, is really cultivating collaboration and ownership. So what we saw within the organization in several places, there's friction between different parties within the organization. There's all kinds of things that are not working perfectly well together. And if there's a lot of friction within the organization, the whole thing comes to a grinding halt. But quite often is that there's some kind of collaboration that is what can help overcome that friction. How should people work together with each other? And so we try to focus on that. And so one of the things we're doing is we have certain workshops where we talk about ownership, but also how do we collaborate. So we talk about, hey, who's taking ownership of what? So we bring several parties together. They are at least struggling with who should do what. And we bring them together to figure out, okay, who should own what kind of thing. But also, very importantly, what is sharedly owned? Where do we take shared ownership of? And how are we going to collaborate on those things where we should collaborate on? Because making that very explicit helps the people think about, okay, this is something I really should do myself. I'll probably be able to find these people, but these are actually things that we should work on together. And so what we also then do is strengthen communities. You need your communities for that collaboration to work. And so an example of that actually is we have an Agile release train that is focusing on robotics. So they do a very cool thing with robotics as a technology, and they're offering a platform for that. So they have a platform for the rest of the organization, great. But one of the things that was happening is that people need the relevant expertise to work on that. So if you need that expertise to work on that, they try to keep it close, but then the rest of the organization is not using that platform anymore. So what we actually did is try to move people to the rest of the organization, and we use communities to then build on the trust with each other. You need the community to bring these people together. They can share best practices. How are you doing things? And that works for them because then they're thinking about working together in the right moments instead of really thinking about, okay, I don't trust them. So these communities can really help you build trust within the organization where it's useful. So, to recap, these are things that we learned at least over the past 2 years. Really balance that pull and push. It's important for your organization to balance the two. You can go either direction, but typically you probably want to balance the two and end up a little bit in the middle. But do ensure a common understanding of DevOps, because if you're going really for a pull approach and people don't understand what it is, or they only think of a little piece of the elephant, they probably will not be able to do a proper pull. But then also really create those hooks to pull in the relevant expertise. Give them a book, for example. Can really work. Nurture that continuous improvement. So you want to organize for that. Make sure that the right roles are already in place. But if you have them in place, empower them. DevOps is just one of the things that can help them. So make sure that they know about it, and then they can make sure that it ends up in the rest of the organization. And then share your success stories also. Really make them widely known because they can inspire others. And then lastly, collaboration and ownership. Remove these organizational frictions, try to remove them. And one way of doing that is really strengthening communities because they can really help you in doing that properly. So for us, this has been an interesting journey, and our journey will continue. It's been a very bumpy road, if I'm being honest, because we're leaving out some of the major bumps that we encountered, really. And we'll have several bumps ahead of us also still. I think that's a lot of fun, so I like doing that. But I hope at least sharing our experiences here today helped to inspire you a little bit in overcoming some of the bumps you might encounter on your journey. Thank you very much.